A waitress from Philadelphia. How charming. I suppose you're the cultural garnish for this transaction. That was the first thing Delphine said to Leora, softly spoken yet sharp enough to draw blood. What followed wasn't just a business deal gone wrong or a woman trying to prove herself. It was a quiet war fought with thread memory and the kind of dignity no one could buy. Before we dive in, let me know what time are you listening to this and where are you? Drop a comment below, we'd love to hear from you. Leora had been awake since 4:12, not because she had someplace better to be, though the past used to be full of places like that, but because sleep had simply abandoned her again, so she walked. Fast. Collar turned up fingers tucked deep in her coat. Block after block of cracked sidewalk air, sharp with the ghost of last night's rain. B's diner flickered at the corner like it hadn't yet decided whether to stay open or give up. The neon bee buzzed dim and stubborn. She slipped through the door. Behind the counter, Brenda hunched over the register as if coins might multiply under her stare. "You look like hell," she murmured, not unkind. "I made peace with mirrors a while ago." Leora hung her coat and moved straight to the routine. Menus wiped silverware set chairs, pulled down tasks performed with the same quiet rhythm she used to fold away thoughts. "You ever miss it?" Brenda asked after a while. That, whatever it was in Paris. A napkin tightened too sharply between Leora's fingers. "It was nice," she said flatly. "Too nice." Brenda only nodded, like someone who understood too much and spoke too little. From the kitchen, Aretha's voice spilled out warm and unashamed. Deshawn followed, sleeves rolled, high eyes keen beneath tired lids. "You're still on this shift, college girl. Remind me why someone with degrees and passport stamps is here, pouring coffee for grumpy white men who think ketchup counts as spice." Her lip twitched. "Because grumpy white men don't ask what I used to dream about." A low whistle, then he vanished back into the clatter of pans. At the counter's edge beneath the register, yesterday's paper lay folded and smudged. An article about an embroidery house in Provence caught her eye. La mémoire tissée. She mouthed the words stilled. "French again?" Brenda asked. "Old habit." The paper slid closed. The doorbell chimed. Mr. Tolliver entered, tailored sharp, wrapped in aftershave and entitlement. No greeting, just claimed the corner booth like it owed him rent. "Black coffee, dry toast. And tell your cook his jam tastes like mop water." Cup poured, plate carried, set before him. He squinted as if measuring something that didn't belong. "You always this quiet or rehearsing for a role you don't quite believe in?" She didn't blink. Collected the tray, walked back toward the kitchen, steady, unbroken, until the clang of a dish slipping from the drying rack cracked through the room. It wasn't loud, but the room held its breath. By noon, bees swelled with sound, cutlery scraping ceramic plates, thudding onto tables, the sizzle of fries battling the jukebox as it replayed the same Sam Cooke track like it couldn't bear to let go. Oil and old conversations clung thick. Even the sugar dispenser sagged with fatigue. Heat gathered at the back of her neck. Leora threaded past a table of teenagers bickering over milkshake flavors and reached booth 5 just as Mr. Tolliver tapped his fork against the plate, each strike a metronome of disapproval. "I told you, no onions. This is the second time. Is this some kind of game?" His words cut through the noise. A sliver of red onion peeked from the sandwich, defiant in its mistake. Leora swallowed whatever she wanted to say, lifted the plate, and turned without comment. At the counter, Brenda gave her a look that meant, "Breathe, don't bite." "He's here again," Clea whispered, breezing past with a tray stacked precariously with 3 coffees and pancakes sliding to one side. Far corner. "Haven't seen him order anything but black coffee." Leora glanced toward the back booth. A man sat with his back to the wall, one ankle resting over the opposite knee, hands folded lightly. Late 30s, maybe 40. Sandy brown hair, slightly unruly, navy wool coat collar still turned up. He didn't belong here, though not in Tolliver's arrogant way. Stillness marked him, not stiff, but intentional, like someone waiting for a page to turn. The door chimed. A gust of wind carried in a woman bundled in a quilted coat, 2 sizes too large, gray hair a storm beneath her knitted hat. Wide eyes peered through smudged glasses as she clutched a worn canvas bag. Kevin, the new kid at the register, offered a half smile. "Ma'am, need a menu?" She shook her head. "Excusez-moi." Je cherche le musée de la ville. Kevin blinked. I don't... Do you speak English? She repeated the question slower, now her voice unsteady. No one moved. From table 5, Tolliver leaned back with a dry chuckle. Well, look what the baguette dragged in. Bonjour, Madame Croissant. Little far from the Champs-Élysées, aren't we? Someone near the window snorted. A sharp cackle cracked the room like a dropped spoon. The woman flinched, hugging her bag tighter. Leora's tray hovered midair. Breath caught not from surprise, but recognition. Vulnerability wrapped in poise, something that tugged at memory. Her feet moved before her thoughts could argue. Madame, vous cherchez quelque chose? French slipped out clean untouched by time. The diner froze. Even the jukebox gave up. Relief spread across the woman's face. She nodded eagerly, speaking quickly about a museum, the wrong bus, her dead phone. Leora listened, jotted directions on a receipt. The woman clasped her hand with both of hers. Merci, ma fille, she whispered, kissing the air beside Leora's cheek in the old European way. When the door closed behind her, quiet lingered. Cleo broke it first with a half-smile. Well, damn, all this time I thought you were just good at latte art. From the counter, Brenda arched an eyebrow. So the degree wasn't a myth. Tolliver studied her with narrowed eyes. Not mocking, not impressed. Something murkier. Leora pressed her lips together. It's just language, she muttered. The lunch rush ebbed. Plates cleared, chairs straightened. At the far booth, the stranger had gone. Only his drained coffee remained. Beneath the cup, carefully tucked, lay a small black envelope. No name, no logo. Matte black sealed. She opened it quickly, unnoticed. $100 bill crisp. A one-way boarding pass to Paris Charles de Gaulle. Departure in 3 weeks. A business card, ivory with raised lettering. Bennett Kastner Sterling Group. Private office. No message. No explanation. Rain had started by the time Leora stepped out, envelope clenched in her coat pocket. Not a storm, just a slow, persistent drizzle settling into the street. A horn echoed 2 blocks away, traffic lights blinking red across the slick pavement. She didn't bother with the umbrella, just stood still, thumb brushing the boarding pass edge. The taxi rolled off, tires whispering over damp cobblestone, leaving her at an arched wooden door framed by ivy and thyme. A brass plaque read Hôtel Saint-Sulpice, elegant without trying. Paris leaned close on every side, bicycle wheels, humming past warm bread, drifting from a boulangerie, lavender, drifting from a high balcony. The concierge greeted with a polite nod, posture precise. A single brass key slid across the desk, followed by a graceful gesture toward the elevator. Her room waited at the end of a narrow hallway, where footsteps echoed like distant memories. Small, warm, unapologetically French rose wallpaper, faded soft, a window that opened inward, a floorboard that creaked near the bed. She sat slowly, coat still on her shoulders. From the street below, an accordion melody rose, curling upward, like breath she hadn't realized she'd held. It didn't soothe. It unsettled, like waking in someone else's dream. Dinner came sooner than expected. The restaurant hid along a side street off Rue de Seine, brass fixtures, white linen candlelight soft enough to make strangers appear kinder. Bennett Kastner was already seated. No tie. Dark suit sleeves rolled to the wrist, as though formality fit him loosely. Bonsoir, he said, rising just enough to nod. No flourish, no forced smile. Leora sat across, posture straight. A waiter appeared, silent and efficient, took their orders, hers, halting his fluent, then slipped away. So she began unfolding her napkin. You send me a plane ticket and $100 bill. Now we're having duck confit. Bennett's expression didn't shift. Would you have come for less? I might have come for more honesty. He studied the rim of his glass, but didn't lift it. I didn't lie. You didn't explain either. Appetizers arrived, delicate, artful. Leora barely touched hers, watching him instead. His gaze lingered on the plate's edge before he spoke. I need access to a house that rarely opens its doors to Americans. Maison Argent. I've tried contacts, consultants. None worked. And I'm the loophole you studied at the Sorbonne. Your French is better than mine. They'll listen to someone who understands lace as art, not inventory. A short laugh slipped from her, sharper than intended. So I'm just a tool with a degree in embroidery. You're free to walk away. She leaned back, fingers toying with her glass stem. His calm unnerved her, like her part had already been calculated to the decimal. No urgency, no plea, only strategy. What if I ruin it? Then we both lose. But it won't destroy us. He spoke like someone who had been destroyed before and returned meaner. They said little after that. Dessert declined, he paid without asking. On the street, he added only, "The driver knows your schedule," before disappearing into the night with the ease of a man who never looked back. At the hotel, the elevator hummed upward. Leora left the room, unlit city glow seeping through the window in soft amber. She opened her suitcase, more habit than need. On top lay a folded bundle, linen pale cream, half-finished embroidery blue thread, wandering a petal abandoned mid-stitch. Her fingers traced the broken pattern. She couldn't recall why she'd stopped, only that she never returned to it. The fabric rested in her lap like a question left unanswered. She held it there a long while. The car veered off the boulevard, winding through streets too narrow for modern maps. Stone walls rose close-stitched with ivy and shadow. They stopped before an iron gate that swung open without a sound. Maison Argent didn't resemble a company. It looked as though time had paused, leaving something sacred behind a limestone villa wrapped around a still courtyard. The garden was clipped but not manicured, vines crawling where they pleased. Quiet pressed in, too careful to feel natural. Leora followed Bennett through the door. Coolness brushed her cheeks, faint traces of cedar and lavender polish hanging in the entry. A receptionist in gray silk dipped her head, nothing more. They moved deeper. The main hall resembled a gallery, cream-painted walls, high ceilings, with cracked moldings, glass cases glowing like reliquaries. Gloves, collars, coin purses, stitched so finely the thread could be mistaken for brushstrokes. The stillness unsettled her. Not because it was empty, but because it seemed to watch. At the corridor's far end, a tall woman waited. Silver hair coiled at her nape, black wool dress, spotless eyes, sharp, precise rather than cruel. She looked like someone who had opinions on everything and the discipline to keep them unspoken. Bennett stepped aside. Leora Hale, Madame Geneviève Tissandier. Heart tugging in places she couldn't name, Leora extended her hand. An honor. Geneviève didn't take it, only inclined her head. You wrote about Fragonard, your thesis. You compared his fabrics to theological symbolism. The words landed with quiet precision like darts into cork. Leora's throat tightened. I didn't think anyone. I still have it. Genevieve's interruption was smooth, too sentimental in parts, but it understood texture. Not warmth, not cruelty, just memory offered back. Heat flushed her skin. She had imagined arriving as a stranger, a professional. Instead, the floor shifted. She wasn't a consultant or neutral observer. She was a former student dragged back into a world she'd abandoned. The tour continued with few words. Each room spoke through thread, embroidered curtains, chairs upholstered in hand-stitched panels, even a lampshade circled with fleur-de-lis. Then came the embroidery room. Unlike the others, it held no machines, no work tables. 3 pedestals stood under dim lights, each bearing a single object. One bag drew her in ivory satin and gold silk, small enough to slip beneath a pillow, yet regal. It looked like a secret carried to the grave. She leaned closer, studying the curled motif at the corners, delicate enough to vanish if touched. Fingers lifted instinctively. Don't. A young staff member in navy stepped between her and the pedestal. No one touches that bag. Last piece made fully by hand before the Maison abandoned hand embroidery. Madame Argent herself stitched the final seam. Leora withdrew. I didn't mean it's not about meaning. It's about rules. She murmured an apology, though something in her recoiled, not at the rebuke, but at how easily she'd forgotten she no longer belonged. The rest blurred faces, clipped words, nothing that stayed. Later, she slipped into the courtyard through a side door near the coat room. Wind stirred the leaves. A cracked wall framed the far end, a brittle grapevine curling across it as if it had surrendered before the season turned. She sat on a bench, sunlight brushing the upper window's hand still in her lap. Her reflection caught faintly in the glass behind her, blurry, hesitant. Eyes lingered on the dying vine, wondering what it meant to be forced into bloom, then boxed in before fruit could set. Sterling Group's Paris branch held a chill too clean to be accidental, as though it sterilized not only marble, but every word within. Heels tapped across polished stone, echoing louder than her pulse. The borrowed blazer at her shoulders felt stiff. A door swung open without a sound. A walnut table stretched beneath pendant lights that hummed faintly. At its far end sat Delphine Moreau. Younger than expected, perhaps late 30s, but posture carved from discipline. Slate gray suit, sharp pearl cufflinks, gleaming lipstick drawn like a warning. Her gaze swept over Leora as if reading a resume she didn't approve of. So, the waitress from Philadelphia. Leora froze mid-step. Delphine's lips curved precise. Forgive me, I meant cultural asset. Isn't that the term we're using? A soft chuckle rose from one of the suits. Leora didn't check who. Fingers tightened on the strap of her bag. I'm here because I speak the language, and because I know Maison Argent. She eased into a seat across from Delphine. Brows lifted. Do you just speak French well enough to impress tourists? Bennett said nothing. Didn't meet her eyes. The meeting ran on. Greetings, clipped updates, expectations laid out like contracts. Leora tried to keep pace, but the French was too sharp, too polished, decades of money folded into vowels. Then Delphine cleared her throat. Since you're here, and since you claim to know the Maison, why not give us a brief presentation? Informal, of course. Leora blinked. Now, yes, impress us. Her body moved before thought. She stood, walked to the head of the table, aware of every rustle of her jacket, every shallow breath. She began with history, Maison Argent's legacy, its centuries-old techniques. Wove in philosophy, heritage, craft the line between commerce and culture. Her voice shook, then steadied hands, sketching points as she spoke. For a beat, the room listened. Then a whisper. From the left. A man leaning close to his colleague, lips barely moving. She's not industry. She's decorative, soft, in French. But it fractured her focus. She finished the thought, forced to close. Energy drained. Attention slipped away. No eyes met hers when she sat down again. Delphine inclined her head, gracious but final. Thank you. Illuminating. No critique, no invitation. Just dismissal in velvet and steel. The rest blurred: licensing clauses, profit margins, Bennett's precise answers. Leora stared at her untouched water glass. When it ended, chairs scraped, suits adjusted, polite murmurs filled the room. Delphine approached once more. Maison Argent is a house of perfection. They don't welcome tourists, even fluent ones. Then she walked off, heels whispering across marble. Paris had cooled. A gray hush spread across the streets, the kind before rain. The car ride back stayed wordless. Facades blurred by iron balconies, rusted in intricate patterns. At a red light, Leora finally spoke. Quiet but cutting clean. Was this your plan? Fly me across the ocean just to humiliate me in front of her? Bennett didn't answer. Jaw flexed once, then stilled. The light turned green. The car rolled forward. Morning light bled through gauzy curtains, silver and soft like breath against glass. Leora blinked at the ceiling, still cocooned in the silence of yesterday. Limbs heavy, as if doubt had settled into her skin overnight. She reached for her phone on the nightstand, then paused. Something crinkled beneath her pillow. A cream envelope lay where her head had rested, thick, unmarked. She unfolded it carefully, a single sheet of ivory paper, handwriting elegant, violet ink curling in precise strokes. You understand the language of fabric. I believe that. If you still want to listen, come to the old studio on Thursday. Gee, no address, no explanation, just that strange, simple invitation. She read the note again, then let it fall into her lap. Who else could G be if not Genevieve? And why now, after that humiliation? Pulling on a sweater, she padded barefoot to the window. The city was already in motion. Motorbikes weaving through the boulevard, a woman balancing a paper bag of croissants, scarf trailing like ribbon in the wind. The boardroom replayed in her mind Delphine's cool dismissal, polite laughter at her expense, Bennett's silence. She couldn't decide what stung more, being underestimated or realizing part of her had expected it. The letter on the table accused her of something she couldn't name. Her phone buzzed. Cleo, Leora swiped. Cleo's face filled the screen, curls haloing her head against the familiar chaos of her South Philly kitchen. Did someone die, or are you just jet-lagged and dramatic? I got a letter, Leora murmured. Like snail mail. What is this 1952 from Genevieve? At least I think so. No stamp. Found it under my pillow. Cleo blinked. Creepy. What's it say she wants me at an old studio? Thursday. Alone. Pause. Then Cleo's eyes narrowed. Test. Or a setup. Or a door. Leora exhaled. Not sure it's meant for me. I'm just the American with a French minor and a waitress resume. Bull, Cleo snapped. You speak the language. You know the history. You care. That scares them. They think I'm a joke. They think you're a threat. That's why they tried to shrink you. Leora didn't answer. Clouds shifted over the city, a thin gold seam breaking through. That afternoon she walked with no map boots, whispering on cobblestones slick with rain. The Seine moved beside her like a low song. Paris no longer felt like the diagrams she once studied, it was mood vibration, hum. She drifted past windows crowded with ribbons, lace thimbles. Fingers twitched, wanting thread she hadn't touched in years. Thursday, Rue de Fleurus. The building was narrow, unmarked except for a brass plaque, Atelier Argent. Paint peeled from the frame, ivy clawed the gutters. Weather had cracked the wood. The door stood ajar. Not wide, just enough for light to slip across the parquet floor. No attendant, no sign, no welcome. She pressed her palm against the wood. The hinge sighed open. Dim warmth spilled over dust that hung like lace unraveling midair. A lavender starch scent lingered, pressed linens forgotten in a drawer. Crossing the threshold, shoes soft against the wood, she listened. Not voices, not music. Only the steady tick of a clock somewhere deeper in the house. She closed the door behind her, moved forward. Floorboards gave quiet protest with each step. Ahead, a doorway bled light across the floor. On a work table beside it rested a spool of red thread, unwound, waiting. Beeswax and cotton clung faintly to the hallway as she walked farther into the atelier. The ticking clock grew louder, sinking with her steps past open rooms bathed in amber. Tables worn smooth by years, bolts of fabric rolled like kept secrets. Spools stacked into quiet towers of faded reds, greens, and golds. In the main workroom, 5 women sat in a half-circle near the window, hands moving with a rhythm that ignored age. One wore a scarf wound like a crown. Another, fingers knotted by arthritis, threaded a needle without hesitation. They didn't pause when she entered. Only a tall, hollow-cheeked woman lifted her gaze. "You're early," she said in French, nodding toward a chair. "Or late, depending on how long you've been gone." Leora hesitated, then sat. The chair groaned softly. A basket of fabric scraps waited near her foot patterns, faded stitches loosened with time. She touched one square blue thread curling across linen in the shape of a poppy, no larger than a coin. "You sew?" asked a woman on her left, Madame Colette, glasses on a chain thimble gleaming like a ring. Her accent was sharp as cloves. "I used to," Leora answered. "Badly. We all did badly once." Colette handed her muslin and a needle already threaded pale green. "Try. This motif nearly forgotten. The girl who designed it never returned. What happened to her? She left. America, I think. Married a man who didn't care for thread." A crooked smile tugged at Leora's mouth before she bent to the fabric. The first stitch wavered. The second, clumsier still. By the fourth, her hands remembered. Around her, the rhythm continued. Needles slid through cloth like whispers. The women spoke in fragments, grandchildren's new jobs, the price of butter silk, misbehaving in summer. No one asked why she was here. No one asked where she came from. Time softened. At some point, Genevieve appeared in the doorway, hair-pinned, tight eyes unreadable. She only nodded once when Leora looked up, then moved on. Colette leaned close. "She remembers your paper. The one on Fragonard. That was a lifetime ago. Still, it impressed her. She doesn't forget detail, like a good stitcher." From across the room, a voice drifted thin as paper. An older woman, half asleep, murmured without lifting her head. "Many come to take photos. You're the first to sit." Words stuck in Leora's throat. That flicker in her ribs, fragile, almost shameful, felt like belonging. An hour later she rose, stretching, spine cracking as the floor groaned beneath her. Drawn to a cabinet at the far wall, she opened it carefully. Parchment and ink scented the wood. Rolls of old designs leaned like scrolls. One bore Sterling Group's crest. She pulled it halfway free. A termination notice. 5 years old. Client Maison Brodé, a family-run embroidery house near Lyon. Breach of agreement. Failure to uphold preservation terms. Her breath caught. She slid it back. The door creaked. Rain brushed against the window pane, steady, unhurried. She drifted toward the glass, past scattered threads and half-finished patterns, until the street below came into view. Umbrellas crowded the boulevard. Headlights smeared pale across wet pavement. Across the road beneath the awning of a shuttered bookstore stood Bennett, hands in his pockets, shoulders pitched forward, watching the building, not moving, not speaking, just there. By mid-afternoon, rain drummed harder against the tall panes, a restless percussion above the workroom. Rows of thimbles and hoops glinted faintly, catching what little light the storm allowed. Leora stood near the far wall, linen folded idly in her hands, though her attention lingered elsewhere, on the subtle shift in the room, tension moving like an unfinished seam. Delphine arrived without warning, perfume preceding her citrus, sharp stone cold. Each step marked the polished floor with deliberate clicks. This place, she murmured in French, always smells like time being wasted. Geneviève didn't rise, only turned her head slightly. Delphine's tone ripened, sweet but heavy. Sterling will proceed with the rebrand. If Maison Argent refuses, the name will be franchised globally. Not a threat, inevitability. Breath seemed to stall in the room. Half hidden behind a display of antique frames, Leora felt each word pierce soft flesh. Franchising, she'd heard nothing. No meeting, no email. Left out. Again. Genevieve's face didn't change, but her hand curled faintly against the chair. Of course, Delphine added, eyes sliding sideways. This depends on whether your American envoy proves persuasive. Her gaze landed on Leora. Then she was gone. Evening fell bruised with rain. The atelier lay empty but for the hum of radiators. Leora wandered toward the rear storage room, needing space from what tomorrow promised. Dim light met her. Lavender lingered with the older scent of dust and wood. A filing cabinet slouched against the wall, one drawer ajar, like a sigh. She hesitated, then pulled. Folders marked in blue ink, brittle with age. Invoices, apprenticeship notes, then Atelier Vaillant 2018. Her pulse skipped. She opened it. Sterling letterhead crowned every page: acquisition contracts, relocation orders, asset valuations. A document stamped confidentiel terminated all staff within 90 days. Another forbade public notice. Her hand stilled. Atelier Vaillant, she knew the name. Whispers in class. Restorers of 18th century ecclesiastical embroidery. She'd once written on their goldwork. Gone. Sterling had swallowed them whole. Archives taken. Silence imposed. Doors shut before winter. Heat surged through her chest. Her hands trembled over the papers. She thought of her lost scholarship, how a single email on a Tuesday morning had erased years of work. No appeals, no doors open. She'd blamed herself. But maybe it had been policy. She slid the folder back, palms pressing the cabinet to steady her. A voice cut through from the hall. Geneviève wants you in the gallery. Tomorrow morning. Claude, the janitor, already wheeling his mop, didn't wait for a reply. Leora stood frozen long after he left. Later, near the staircase, Geneviève appeared as she reached for her coat. They're meeting with the board, she said plainly. Delphine, Bennett, the final pitch, and me. You'll speak for the house. You want me to endorse a deal I haven't even seen. Say what you believe, but say it well. The pause between them felt taut, unspooled by the weight of it. Genevieve's voice lowered, edged but firm. If you think the house deserves better, say so. If you think it deserves to die, say that too. She turned heels, striking a measured path down the corridor. Leora remained alone with the locked cabinet where someone once had hidden away the last truth worth stitching. The presentation room carried faint traces of lemon wax and old paper. Leora lingered at the back after the others left, fingers hovering over the unattended laptop glowing on the podium. She wasn't sure why she touched it, habit, curiosity, or something else. The slideshow flickered awake, not from the start, left midstream. She clicked back, expecting corporate filler, strategy alignment, empty promises. Then the title appeared, a slide of Maison Argent's embroidered pouch underlined with a quote, "When craftsmanship becomes spectacle, it loses its soul." Her stomach tightened. That wasn't just familiar, it was hers. Another click. More quotes woven between images of aged hand, sepia workshop silk twisting into form. Every phrase poetic, precise, academic, lifted from her senior thesis. Words she'd written 6 years ago at the Sorbonne, hunched over a borrowed laptop pouring her unspoken life into research. Now uncredited, sanitized, repackaged, breath shortened. Footsteps echoed from the corridor. She didn't turn. Bennett's reflection surfaced in the dark glass of the screen behind her, warped by light. You knew. His pause answered before words came. The thesis was archived. Public. The team integrated parts of it into the deck. You didn't think it might matter. I thought you'd be proud. It's your language, your insight. It convinced Maison Argent to meet it all. No, she cut in. I did. I spoke. I built the trust. And you let me walk in blind thinking I'd been invited into something sacred when I was just part of a pitch. Bennett drew breath, but nothing followed. Did you plan it all? The cafe, the envelope, the plane ticket. Were you watching me before the diner? A beat. Then, that wasn't planned, but you didn't stop it either. I needed someone they'd listen to, so you used my words. Like everyone else. He lowered his eyes. Back at the hotel, Paris sprawled unchanged beyond the window. Street lamps flickering on wet cobblestones, scooters, buzzing voices drifting through narrow alleys. But in her chest, something brittle pressed down. Not anger. A weight that felt like ash. The bag dropped onto the bed half-zipped. A silk scarf slid free landing beside an old book. L'art qui sait, the art that keeps silent. She hadn't opened it since college. A knock broke the stillness. No one waited in the hall. Only an envelope cream violet ink. Genevieve's hand. Liora unfolded the page slowly. Il y a des voix qu'on étouffe même sans crier. Mais celles qui parlent avec les mains, on les entend toujours. Some voices are silenced without a sound, but the ones that speak through hands, we always hear them. Beneath in English, if you still wish to learn, come to the back atelier on Thursday. Come alone. Her palm stayed on the paper long after the ink seemed to breathe through the fibers. The phone buzzed Cleo once. Bennett again. She turned it face down. No reply. She pulled on her coat, wrapped the scarf at her throat, slipped the letter into her pocket. Closed the door softly. On the nightstand, the phone blinked one last time, then went dark. She descended the staircase, past the concierge, without a glance stepped into the street. Rain touched the pavement light first, then steadier. She didn't run. Walked with head lowered, letter warm in her palm, as the night folded around her like a page turned too soon. The metro rattled through the dark, its windows smeared with grime. Leora sat near the back, her reflection flickering in and out between stations, thinner eyes sharper, like someone trying not to be caught thinking too much. At the next stop, a worn pair of shoes halted beside her. Leora looked up. Madame Rousseau stood there, apron still faded still, carrying the faint trace of cedarwood and old thread. You remember what I told you about purple dye? It's the hardest to fix, Leora answered quietly. Never stays true. A tired smile curved Rousseau's lips. Not unless the fire is timed just right. Too soon it fades. Too late it burns. The train lurched forward before Leora could reply, words stolen with the jolt. The rest of the ride passed wordless Rousseau's presence, softening the restless noise in her head. At her stop, a light touch landed on her wrist. You'll know when it's ready to come out of the flame. Leora didn't sleep that night. Rousseau's words looped endlessly, louder than Bennett's stillness, louder than Delphine's smirk. Around 3, she dragged her suitcase out, unzipped the hidden pouch. A crumpled linen blouse unfolded in her lap, one she hadn't worn since undergrad. Creased pale. She pressed it flat with a towel and the base of a mug filled with boiling water. No earrings, no makeup, just cotton breath and worn leather shoes. By 8:45, she stood before Sterling's glass door's reflection, warping with each breath. The figure staring back didn't match the one inside. Maybe that was the point. She walked through, no badge, no call ahead, just steady steps across polished stone, drawing sidelong glances and half whispers. The boardroom loomed at the end of the corridor, sealed by frosted glass. Raised voices hummed behind it. Leora pushed the door open. Delphine paused mid-sentence, fingers poised above her tablet. Board members stiffened. Bennett stood near the window, arms folded, unreadable. I need to speak, Leora said, calm, unshaken. Not for anyone else. For myself. Delphine recovered first sugar, threaded with steel. Miss Hale, this is a closed, I'm not asking. She crossed the room, rested her hands on the back of an empty chair blouse, wrinkled at the elbows. You're preparing to move Maison Argent's archives to New York. You're rebranding with materials you didn't create, built on research stolen without consent. A murmur rippled. Delphine's lips didn't shift. You're misinformed. I read the deck, Leora pressed. The pitch copy, the story of heirloom threads in generational hands, it's mine. Word for word from my thesis. You didn't ask, you didn't credit, because you assumed the girl from the diner wouldn't notice. Heads turned toward Bennett. He remained still. She refused to glance his way. This isn't preservation. It's packaging, dressing memory in gloss and calling it authenticity. An older board member leaned forward. And what do you suggest instead? I'm not here to propose. I'm here to warn you. Erase the soul of this work, and the customers you're chasing will see through it. The ones who should care most, they already do. Delphine opened her mouth, but nothing followed. The room stretched taut gauze over a wound. Finally, the older man nodded. Noted. She turned, hand brushing the cool brass of the door. Bennett's voice followed, low, uncertain. Leora. She didn't stop. The door opened with a hiss. Her steps echoed down the marble hall, blood in her ears, keeping time until even that quieted. Beyond, the glass clouds pressed heavy but bright. Reflections no longer showed her face, only motion. Only someone walking forward. Heat shimmered faintly along the boardroom walls, though the windows stayed shut and the air recycled. Leora stepped in, badge still clipped to her coat pocket, a chill sweat tracing her spine. Delphine sat at the head of the oval table, poised, radiant in a navy suit posture, carved from stone, smile honed to a blade. 7 board members ringed the table, too quiet, too still. Only one chair sat empty across from her. Bennett was absent. Leora didn't sit. Delphine let the pause stretch steam in a kettle left to shriek. When she finally spoke, the words cut clean. Well, if it isn't our favorite barista turned bargaining chip? Nails pressed into Leora's palm. I'm here to correct a mistake, she replied, pulling a slim folder from her satchel. And to ask who signed off on a non-disclosure buyout for the Restoration House in Avignon 2018. She laid the pages out. Photocopies, annotated contracts, emails forwarded from a former artisan. Delphine's gaze didn't flicker. Are you accusing Sterling Group of historical malpractice? Miss Hale, no, Leora said evenly. I'm stating it. A thin curl lifted Delphine's lips. Accusations weigh more than words. You'll need context. I have context. I lived in it. I studied the culture you're gutting for polish. You erased the work of dying artisans and sold it back as nostalgia. The man beside her reached for the folder, flipping through with neat, rehearsed motions. Delphine gave him 5 seconds before sliding her phone across the table. A tap. Audio spilled through the room. Leora's own voice clipped, rearranged. I can help them trust Sterling. If they won't talk to the board, they might listen to me. Let me handle the pitch. I'll make it sound personal. Stillness settled, not confusion, judgment already circling. That was taken from a private call, Leora said slowly. Delphine folded her hands. You offered yourself as a bridge. Now you claim betrayal. I didn't know then what I know now. But you knew enough to gamble with your reputation, didn't you? Delphine's tone softened to silk. So available, so flexible. Remarkable for someone who claims moral clarity. The table didn't laugh. They didn't need to. The weight landed anyway. Leora forced herself upright, though her knees wanted to fold. You're twisting it. That file was edited. Delphine shrugged. Your words, not mine. I only gave the room perspective. The oldest man exhaled. Relevant to the acquisition terms? Entirely. Delphine answered smoothly. We can't afford emotional instability in a negotiation this delicate. One sentence enough to turn her from speaker to liability. A flick of framing. No Bennett, no objections, not even surprise. She gathered the folder slowly, both hands steady though her chest shook. Then turned. No one stopped her. The door shut behind her like a gavel strike. The elevator was worse, mirrored walls, warping her reflection, descent too fast. She stared at the gold-toned blur of her own face, too pale, too blurred at the edges. She walked out, hard footsteps louder than necessary. Past marble, past glass, into noon Paris, where strangers brushed by with no pause. Only when she reached a narrow alley 3 blocks down, behind a cafe she'd passed but never entered, did she stop. The stench of grease and rain-soaked cardboard clung to the walls. She sank onto an overturned crate badge still clenched in her fist. Metallic tang, damp heat clinging, blouse stuck to her back, breath scraping shallow. No Bennett, not even a message. She leaned forward, forehead to knees, shadows closing around her. No tears, none for them, not here. A gutter rattled above. A bird crossed the strip of sky and didn't hesitate. The world, like the boardroom, didn't flinch. In her hand, the badge, cheap laminate thin fiction, refused to crumple. The doorman barely looked up as she passed. A newspaper sprawled on the counter, folded, but not enough to hide her face on the front page. Leora paused, breath snagging, before she forced herself forward. The automatic doors closed behind her with the soft finality of a verdict. Upstairs, the key clicked in the lock. Curtains breathed faintly by the open window, the room waiting in stillness. A glass had toppled on the table, leaving a glittering trail across the floor, shimmer like spilled dust, impossible to clean. Notes and drafts lay strewn about, fragments of a presentation that might once have rebuilt trust. Now only ash in paper form. No attempt to gather them. Shoes slid off, body folding onto the bed, still-clothed knees pulled in, as though smaller might mean safer. The headline hadn't warned. L'Américain qui murmure à l'oreille de la mémoire française. The American who whispers to the ear of French memory. A photo caught her with Bennett outside the studio, standing too close in wrong light. Her smile faint, his expression unreadable. To readers hungry for scandal, it suggested intimacy, strategy, seduction. To traditionalists, betrayal. The article painted her in velvet poison, a waitress turned infiltrator, a pawn draped in sentiment. Backlash gathered swiftly. 6 emails from Maison Argent staff, 5 polished apologies, 1 blunt cancellation of their tour. The artisan group chat went silent by noon. Genevieve didn't return her call. Even Cleo's message shrank into a single line. "You okay?" No reply sent. What could cover it? That she'd walked in eyes open? That hope still whispered merit counted? That she believed her voice could stitch together something older, fragile, nearly gone? One page caught the draft of wind landing on her chest. Her own handwriting? Protect the soul of a thing, and the thing might survive. Eyes closed. A piano drifted faintly through thin walls, scales stumbling, uncertain, student or ghost she couldn't tell. Curtains lifted, another page skimmed her ankle, vanished beneath the bed. She let it. Those notes were written as if someone might read with care, instead of turning them into spectacle. No knock at the door, no apology, no Bennett. She rolled onto her side toward the blur of rooftops through rain. Bells tolled somewhere far, half remembered. On the desk, one sheet lay anchored by her phone, the title page of her thesis, years old. Edges faded, words intact, preserving the invisible thread. Memory craft and cultural inheritance. Finger brushed across the title. This was what they had stripped away, not her body, her accent, her face, but her thought, her attention, the care she once trusted to matter. Sterling had polished it into market gloss, sold it as theirs, then let her burn as kindling. She slid the page beneath a book, rose slowly. Her coat sagged over the chair. Bennett's card still tucked in the pocket, like a thorn she hadn't pulled. Curtains stirred once more. A page skidded across the floor, tapped the wall with a sigh. This time she closed the window. Morning bled gray sky, the color of wet ash. Leora lay fully dressed on the bed when her phone blinked to life against her cheek. One line. No greeting, no punctuation. You were never crazy. Page 9 and 17. From Cleo. The attachment stalled, loading slow enough to sting. Fingers hovered, afraid a tap might spark something irreversible. When at last the screen sharpened, letters glowed against black. Sterling Group. Internal communication. Draft dated 2 months before Paris. Page 9. Create multiple third-party social identities to influence public perception. Preserve brand prestige narrative. Discredit emerging voices with too much personal investment. Beneath it, timestamp. Delphine's initials. Page 17, memo from Bennett Kastner. Subject, media exposure guidelines. Recommend excluding Ms. Hale from all visual press material unless consent is explicitly provided. Handwritten reply, scan below. Noted, rejected. D. Her chest loosened, not relief, not betrayal. A sharp recognition instead. The rules of the game had been set long before she stepped onto the board. Rain tapped at the glass. She rose, scarf pulled high, folder tucked under her coat. No makeup, no umbrella. Boots drank in the water pooling on Rue Madame. Maison Argent's gate gave its usual creak. In the window, Geneviève waited. No pleasantries, no delay. Lyra placed the handwritten pages on the sewing table and stepped back. You brought me something, the older woman observed. Not an article, not a pitch. A record, Lyra answered. Geneviève read quickly, expression unchanged, lips pressed thin now and then. Dust glowed gold on the sill. A pigeon cooed from the courtyard. Lyra stayed still, knuckles pale around her clasped hands. 10 pages, and Geneviève looked up. You wrote this from memory, a nod. You didn't name yourself. It wasn't about me. Fingers closed, the folder resting over it like a seal, which is why it carries weight. Her throat caught. It won't change anything. Not for them. A porcelain cup clicked against its saucer. Change is foolish to chase. Clarity, however, clarity lasts. You spoke what the archive refused. They'll dismiss you at first. That only means you struck a nerve. Geneviève crossed to a cabinet, drew out a bundle of hand-dyed silk, mauve with an olive undertone, rare, nearly impossible to preserve. Madame Fournier spun this herself, she said, placing it in Leora's hand. Keep it, but not under glass. The thread warmed against her palm. Your voice found its place in a language that forgets women often. Speak louder. No blessing, no permission, just truth. Leora left with the thread in her pocket folder, hugged close. Wind pulled at her coat, damp strands against her cheek. Yet the city no longer leaned away from her. Shop fronts and sidewalks seemed steadier, almost familiar. At the cafe corner, Cleo's text buzzed through. Whatever you're doing next, do it louder. She didn't reply. Just cross the street, chest no longer. Stone something harder now. Steel. Pressed lilies and faint heat from cables lingered. Linen drapes softened the lamp's overhead camera haze, blurring edges. The conference room felt less like celebration, more like a chamber waiting for a verdict. No applause yet, only rustling anticipation, the hum of live feeds in 2 languages. Leora stayed behind the curtain, fingers locked around the worn handle of the embroidered bag. Threads had faded, seams loosened, yet it endured, quiet, dignified. Like her. Through a narrow slit in the velvet, she watched. On stage, the table waited beneath gray cloth. Geneviève took the center shoulder's straight expression, carved in restraint. 2 boardmen flanked her, bland in the way power often chose to disguise itself. The final chair remained empty, until Bennett walked in. Not his usual navy suit and an earth-toned jacket that clashed with his slacks tie absent. He looked like a man who had crossed a private line and decided not to step back. The moderator began with courtesies, but the room didn't truly breathe until Geneviève leaned forward. We are not here to sell stories, she said in French first, then English. We are here to preserve them. Maison Argent will remain fully autonomous in design heritage production. Sterling Group will not dictate, only fund if needed. The translator's hesitation gave weight to every syllable. Words landed like silk striking stone. Bennett followed. We don't seek to extract value from legacy. We're here to support whatever path it chooses, even one without us. No branding gloss, no slogans. Just that. Pen stopped scratching. A journalist asked who wrote this proposal. It doesn't sound like your usual style. Bennett paused, glanced down, then up again. I'm only signing it. Attention shifted to Geneviève. Instead of answering, she turned, not theatrically, not overt, just a deliberate glance toward the corridor behind the stage, toward Leora. No name spoken, no spotlight, yet something altered. Heads turned, curiosity rippling. She didn't step forward, didn't wave, didn't speak. She only stood straight, her hands steady on the handbag, gaze level, not hiding anymore. The curtain stayed closed, but her presence filled the space behind it. Enough. Delphine's name never surfaced. Her absence did the work, a silence heavier than rebuttal. The conference ended not with applause, but with stillness that carried dignity. People filed out slowly, whispers threading the aisle's brows. raised, some nodding, as though they'd witnessed a quiet shift in power, not of titles but of meaning. Leora slipped through a side exit. Cool wind brushed her cheeks. Clouds over the Seine, thin sunlight laying gold across rooftops and railings. Her coat hem lifted. She let it. Rue de Médicis stretched before her. She crossed without looking back. A pigeon startled beneath a cafe awning, wings brushing past her shoulder like silk. In the florist's window, she caught fragments of herself, a jawline part of her brow, the embroidered bag at her side. The rest washed out in light, and she recognized it anyway. Recognition no longer needed the whole picture. No announcement, no message, no forwarded itinerary. Just a one-way ticket, a window seat, and a coat faintly scented of lavender soap from Paris. The train slid into Philadelphia under a ceiling of low clouds. Boots rang against the platform. City sounds returned like muscle memory, cars hissing through puddles, the hollow clang of a trash bin somewhere down the block, the hush of strangers not speaking to one another. At the corner of Juniper and Tasker, the chipped brick of her old building leaned the same tired way. Narrow stairs carried her up fingertips, grazing cold metal railing. The apartment door stuck halfway, as if the frame had grown stiff in her absence. When it finally yielded, the room exhaled like it had been holding its breath. Dust-faint metal. The banged-up kettle still sat on the stove. A spoon lay in the sink beneath a thin film of time. The radiator hissed. On the windowsill, a terracotta pot waited, soil-cracked plant long gone. Her coat dropped to the chair bag to the floor. From its pocket, she drew a stack of pages tied with a waxy blue ribbon. The manuscript, the one Geneviève had guarded, now returned. On the last page in looping French script, cette langue mérite d'être maintenue vivante. This language deserves to be kept alive. Her thumb brushed the ink, smudging the edge. Something shifted in her chest, not quite pride, not yet peace. That night she wandered. B's diner glowed faintly at the block's end. Neon buzzing windows steamed. She pushed the door. The bell jingled unevenly. Brenda looked up from the register, glasses sliding. Well, well. Look who crawled out of Paris Vogue. Leora cracked a smile. Don't start rumors. Corner or booth, kitchen's barely open. Corner. She slid into the cracked vinyl seat she'd claimed 100 times before. Coffee came without asking. Still black, or has Paris ruined you? Still black, just more dramatic about it now. Through the pass window, Deshawn spotted her. No word. Just disappeared, then reappeared with a plate, eggs, over-easy toast cut on the diagonal, 3 strips of peppered bacon, curled just right. He set it down like a peace offering. No charge. Next time you owe me a story. Fork in hand, she shrugged. Not sure I have good ones left. He tilted his head. You're sitting here, ain't you? The diner hummed fluorescents, buzzing forks, clinking 2 men at the counter debating basketball like scripture. Nothing had changed. Yet it no longer felt like a cage. The eggs cooled untouched. She wrapped both hands around the mug instead, letting heat seep into her palms long after the coffee went lukewarm. Night stretched quiet on the walk-home sidewalk, slick from drizzle she hadn't noticed. Upstairs, she cracked the window an inch. A faint green scent rode the breeze. Dawn slid gently between buildings, pooling across the floorboards. She brewed tea, not coffee, and watched steam curl upward. Something caught her eye. The pot, once only cracked earth, now held a sliver of green, fragile, trembling, alive. Her thumb rested on the rim. For the first time in years, she felt no need to explain anything. To anyone. Curtains shifted in the morning draft. She left the window open. At 9:02 a.m., an email arrived, wedged between a detergent coupon and a newsletter she didn't remember signing up for. Subject board update. Sterling Holdings. She clicked without thinking. Brief message. Corporate tone. Sanitized words. Effective immediately, Ms. Delphine Kastner has tendered her resignation from the board of directors. Sterling Holdings expresses gratitude for her service and wishes her success in future endeavors. No apology, no admission. Just an absence dressed up in polite farewell. 3 hours later, headlines broke across business sections and art blogs. Sterling to face European regulatory review after allegations of media misconduct. She didn't read beyond the first paragraph. The story was already too familiar. That afternoon, a package waited at her door. No sender, no return address, only handwriting sharp and deliberate, unmistakable. A single sheet creased but clean. A scan from what looked like a board memo. At the bottom, one signature stood apart: Bennett Kastner. Opposed. No note. No explanation. No attempt at rewriting history. She folded the page once and slid it back into the envelope, left it by the window untouched. Then she walked, through the Market Street chill, past the cafe with its broken neon sign, around a block that smelled faintly of asphalt and baking bread, north into a neighborhood where murals of long-gone jazz legends flaked from brick walls and shop fronts leaned tired against each other. A narrow door waited between a laundromat and a corner store. Faded paint above spelled Stitch and Kin. The space was smaller than she'd imagined. Warm, one wall lined with thread spools in every shade. Yellowed light overhead, a faint scent of old wood and lemon polish. Behind a worn table stood a woman with hair tied in a gray scarf, hands busy with fabric, eyes shrewd but kind. "You're the one who emailed, I am. Leora Hale. You're not from here. 15 minutes south. But your heart's still somewhere else." "Maybe, or maybe I got tired of leaving pieces of it everywhere." The woman studied her, then asked, "You really studied this?" "I never left it. I just paused long enough to remember why I started." A thoughtful nod. "We hold a class every Wednesday evening, mostly teenagers, a few grandmothers who can still thread needles without glasses. We can use another pair of hands." "I'm not looking for a platform," Leora said quickly. "I'm not here to," good, the woman cut in. "We don't run platforms here, just stories sewn in thread." That Wednesday she returned. No cameras, no press, no rumors of scandal or redemption. Only a circle of mismatched chairs. A table cluttered with embroidery hoops and fabric scraps. A girl with chipped purple nails asking how to stitch a leaf. An older man cracking quiet jokes while threading needles for others. Leora taught gently backstitch satin fill, guided a boy sketching a basketball net onto linen. No one asked who she was. She didn't explain. By the time the class ended, the sky had deepened to navy, the kind that blurred city lights at the edges. She walked slower afterward. At the corner, a stray gust tugged her scarf loose. She caught it midair and looked up. The moon hung low and wide, steady above rooftops, antennas, fire escapes. For once, no expectations waited at the end of the street. No roles to resume, no performance required. Just a thimble in her pocket, in the quiet satisfaction of mending something with her own two hands. And somewhere, maybe a page turning toward what came next. By late June, mornings thickened with sun, not the weak, diluted kind of early spring, but rich, steady rays that stretched across counters and warm tile floors before anyone touched the coffee maker. The small kitchen behind the community center always carried a trace of burnt toast. Not unpleasant, more like memory. Some mornings it mingled with cinnamon from someone's breakfast, other times with garlic from a reheated lunch. Details shifted, but the burnt edge, sharp and faintly sweet, remained. A box radio with a bent antenna whispered jazz. Sometimes Ella, sometimes Coltrane. Always a little ache behind the notes. In the room beyond, a long table stretched beneath open windows. 7 people sat around it, heads bent, fingers busy. Needles, threaded fabrics, stretched threads, danced quietly between calloused thumbs and curious hands. Leora moved from chair to chair, not teaching so much as keeping rhythm, adjusting tension, demonstrating stitches, guiding a woman who wanted to embroider her grandson's name, though she'd never sewn before. Her own hoop rested on the windowsill, half-finished. She didn't rush it. The class was small. An older woman from Haiti stitched memories of the sea. A Korean grandfather embroidered birds on napkins for his granddaughter's lunchbox. 2 teenagers, one nonverbal, one sharp-tongued, communicated in thread more honestly than words ever allowed. No one asked where she'd been. No one cared about Paris. They came for thread, for stories, and slowly so had she. One Tuesday morning, as the room hummed and needles clicked, a shadow filled the doorway. No knock, no announcement. Bennett, not in a suit, no tie, no badge, just jeans and a navy jacket wrinkled at the elbows. Hair a little longer, face quieter. He didn't smile, didn't step forward. But he held something wrapped in canvas and time. "I thought it belonged here," he said. Leora turned. The embroidered tote she'd designed in Paris looked smaller now, its colors dimmed by dust and neglect. But the stitchwork, the soft curves of thread, the layering of ivory and plum still held. She blinked once, then twice. Bennett set the bag on the nearest table. They never hung it, he said it didn't belong without its maker. A pause. I didn't come for an answer. She tilted her head. That's good, she said. Then she pulled back the empty chair by the window. Wood scraped softly across the floor, an invitation without demand. He hesitated, then sat. Neither spoke again. Children ran across the patchy lawn. A sprinkler squeaked as it turned. Sun spilled over the grass, catching on little plastic beads left from yesterday's craft project. A breeze slipped through the screen, lifting the edge of the canvas bag. It fluttered once, then settled. Leora rested one hand on the sill, the other toying with a frayed ribbon. There was no stage here, no press, no redemption speech, just a chair, a needle, a room where people stitched what had once fallen apart. And that was enough. Sometimes healing didn't sound like victory. It sounded like toast popping, children shouting, jazz playing just loud enough to matter. Sometimes it didn't need to be louder than that, just honest. The world might tell you you're only the girl who brings coffee, that you don't belong in rooms lined with silk and stained glass. But belonging isn't given. It's claimed one thread, one truth, one quiet act of courage at a time. If Leora's story carries anything, let it be this: you don't have to speak loudly to change a room. You just have to speak honestly. And sometimes that's more than enough.